One of my favorite days of the year at MIT is commencement. Standing in Killian Court, looking out over a sea of faces who have just had one of the most amazing and transformational educational experiences that they could have.
You look out in the audience and you see people from all over the world, literally. And more important than that, you see so many different cultures, so many different mindsets. And I think the great thing is that you see it there together.
Let me tell you about an interesting experience I have. I actually lead the undergraduates into Killian Court. As we do that, we always stop and allow the class that is from 50 years ago to go ahead of us. So that sets up a very interesting contrast, because I can literally look in front of me and see the class as reflected from 50 years ago, and I can look behind me and actually see the class as it is, today.
In some notable ways, MIT was much less diverse. There were only a handful of women.
Not only was the class predominantly male, but it was of a single ethnic group.
But in a lot of ways, in terms of spirit and interests and culture, I would say that the class of 1950 and the class of 2010 are not much different.
I talked to the people from 50 years ago, and they remember those days, and they were young and energetic and full of dreams to change the world. And I talk to the class today, and they're young and energetic and full of dreams to change the world.
In the 19th century, students usually came to MIT to study the useful arts. The useful arts would have been mechanical engineering, civil engineering, architecture, and then they were followed by electrical engineering.
Besides being male and native-born and white, the typical student, they tended to be older, they lived in rooming houses, they were more grown up in many ways.
Sons of working people, I would say most of them came from middle-class backgrounds. The number of women at MIT was very small compared to the number of men. And the number of blacks at MIT was even smaller yet.
And then you do have a small number of students from primarily Asia who come to MIT to develop skills that will help their country to develop technological independence. I guess you could call it technological nationalism.
The thing that is amazing to me about this place is that William Barton Rogers' vision of mens et manus, mind and hand, has held up so well over the years, and it obviously expanded and changed, but it's still basically there. How many institutions can make that sort of claim?
MIT is maybe unique in the extent to which its evolution was thoughtful and thought ahead of time.
When you think of a university, you think of a much broader agenda. It's not just engineers, it's schools of science, humanities, social sciences. When Carl Compton arrived at MIT in 1930, the shift began.
Compton was brought in to really boost the role of the sciences here and to make them co-equal partners with engineering.
He began to bring to MIT first-class scientists. By the time Killian became president, you could begin to speak of the Institute as being a science-based university. And by 1970, let's say, all the sciences at MIT were world-class, and the humanities were on the way up.
No technical knowledge can outweigh knowledge of the humanities, in the gaining of which philosophy and history walk hand in hand.
Well, Winston Churchill actually came and gave a talk where basically he said, this institution should have a School of Humanities.
The School of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences was started because the war had proved that the implications of science and engineering went far beyond the laboratory or even industry.
We all are proficient at using the tools. We all go after challenging problems. And in doing so, we can forget the human-human interaction. We can forget that it's not just about water purification, but it's about the individuals who are drinking the purified water once you develop the water purification system.
It's interesting that as the students that we admit struggle to choose which college they want to attend, they're not looking really at other institutes of technology so much. They're looking at the other world-class universities. You don't have to sacrifice your interest in the humanities and the arts when you come to MIT. That in fact, you can have it all.
You know, having programs like the humanities and social sciences enriches the educational experience. I think it puts them in a position to go out into the world and be literate about politics, about society, about cultural affairs. That's very important, and I think it's really a key dimension to undergraduate education at MIT.
The gender balance in the freshman class, 1950 compared with 2011, is enormously different.
MIT had women from almost its earliest days, but never had very many, in part because it wasn't something that was pushed on girls, but in part because there was no housing for women on the campus. In the 1960s, a girls' dorm had been built, thanks to the generosity of one of the early co-eds, Catherine Dexter McCormick.
She said, I want to build a dormitory for women, and the first tower of McCormick Hall was built. When she saw how well it was going, she said, I'll build a second tower also. And through that interval, the numbers increased dramatically.
Once it was there, it was a constant reminder that it should be filled and it should expand and that women belonged here.
The administration started to take very seriously finding out how to introduce more diversity.
When I first entered MIT in 1982, MIT was about 20% female. And by the time I had left in 1986, we were getting close to about a third. So that start of getting near gender parity continues.
So walking down the infinite corridor, it's just a different world.
Change for minority students began also in the 60s. Prior to 1968, the number of African American kids in a class could be counted on two hands, usually on one. In 1968, there were two assassinations. First, Martin Luther King, and next, Bob Kennedy. And they shook the nation. They particularly shook the minority community, broadly put.
The Black Student Union presented a list of demands to the administration, except we actually called them proposals, 10. And that's when the administration formed the Task Force on Educational Opportunity and asked Paul Gray to lead it. Now, I must say the point of view that I had at the time was that if the Institute wasn't going to do it on its own, then it left no choice but for students to be engaged.
And we quickly learned that if we were going to increase the number of African Americans here, the key was to begin recruiting. MIT had not recruited up to that point anyone.
And so it involved a real commitment on the part of the administration and on the part of students, because students were actually going out and recruiting, and so there wouldn't be a real presence if it weren't for what went on during that period.
The tough part of diversity is that when you bring a group of folks together that are different, then you're going to come up with different answers. And that's challenging because it forces you to rethink what you think is right.
Diversity does not mean sacrificing excellence. We need to bring all of the talent to bear if we are to remain the leader in the areas of research and education.
And in some respects, the students now see beyond their own ethnicity, their own culture, and they're more willing to connect.
Students today, there's no majority race and ethnicity on campus. It's a real, very diverse set of students, and much more so, certainly than the class of 1950, but even than the class of 1960, the class of 1970, 1980, and the class of 1990.
MIT definitely has a long way to go. But what's exciting is that I do see a number of elements in place that will really help to get us there.
A large student living group resides in the dormitories and enjoys a type of community living. Roommates work together harmoniously. Inside this door, it's strictly no men allowed. Here the co-eds congregate between classes and relax from the pressure of classwork. In typical feminine fashion, the girls take time out to gossip about clothes and dates, exchange news, and congratulate or sympathize with one another about their grades.
So that's how MIT represented itself in 1957.
Part of my job is to go out and recruit students to MIT at the graduate level. And so everyone's asking, well, what's an MIT student like? Is there a typical MIT student? What's the experience like at MIT? And part of your challenge is going to be, is there a common thread that sort of ties what seems to be very different individuals together? And if there's a way to pull out that common thread while not negating the individuality, then I think that will enhance the work that you do.
I'd say the one thing we do have in common is that none of us leave here with our sanity.
No.
Yeah.
They're not like normal in like what their interests are, because like they're very like unique in what they want to do, but they're not like weird people. They're all like just really friendly and right.
When I was thinking about who to interview, the first person that came to mind was someone named Kevin. So I went to call him on my phone, and it turns out I got Devin and Kevin confused on my phone. So that's why we are interviewing Devin today. So Devin, is there a typical MIT student?
I would say there's not a typical MIT student. They might have some typical traits.
The typical MIT student is exceptionally passionate.
Another word you might use is obsessiveness.
Here I see more of the obsession for the thing itself, as in, you really, really like your work, which is why you do it.
There are a wide variety of different kinds of students here.
It's like any climate, there are microclimates.
If not here, you'll usually find me at the computer lab. So my favorite computer is the one where you can kind of monitor the whole area. But there's another architecture student, Rudy, who also likes that place. And he wakes up earlier than I do.
MIT students are hardworking, they might have some sleep deprivation, but we're pretty different.
I think I can express it best by sharing a comment that a former colleague has made. And he says, the odds are good and the goods are odd.
This is basically the symbol of MIT, the fire hose. You have all that knowledge thrown at you, but there's so much of it that you will get very little of it.
Over the years, I have really come to just love MIT students. They're very curious. And then they get involved with the other students in the classroom.
It's pretty cool to see like all these students getting along. You don't just have like a group of people who are like sticking together and not interacting with others.
How did we meet?
We did a summer program together. It's actually at MIT too. It's called MITES. So science, engineering.
It starts with M. Minority Introduction to
Engineering and Science. Yeah, it's a great program.
I haven't slept that much.
Yeah, I know. I can tell. I haven't slept much either.
You can tell.
So, do I like MIT? Yes, I actually do. I mean, definitely the sleepless nights, they can be a pain, but overall, the experience has been pretty amazing.
About a third of our students, when they come here, don't say they want to do mechanical engineering, right? Or they want to do electrical engineering. What they say is they want to solve the energy problem.
I think the MIT student really views themselves as part of a bigger picture.
The amount of public service and community service that our undergraduates participate in has absolutely exploded in the last few years. Our students are doing all kinds of service projects all over the world.
I've sometimes said MIT students outdo the stereotype of MIT students. This willingness to work hard is really true. And I think that's always been the case here.
So if a student from MIT of 1900, and a student from MIT of 1950, and a student of MIT of today were to sit down, I think they'd find that they have a lot in common.
One part of their discussion would be around what the on-campus individual looks like. In the dialogue, they would see some significant differences. But I think if you asked them to close their eyes and so to talk about what's on the inside, I think it would be exactly the same.
MIT is still MIT. There's an ethos of the place. I'm an anthropologist. There's a culture. It's a very, very visible culture.
The diversity of MIT is evident just by looking out at the sea of faces in Killian Court. But a lot of the diversity you can't see. The diversity of ideas, the diversity of interests, the diversity of thought.
There is just always this vibrancy, this vigor, this openness to creativity that I just haven't found anyplace else.
In all those generations of students, the Institute has turned out people who do important things, and that hasn't changed.
Hello?
Hello, Michael?
Hi.
Hi, congratulations on being accepted. Are you excited?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, that's good.
Is it true that you only get 2 hours of sleep a night?
That is definitely not true.
What would you say is like the atmosphere? Like a lot of schools are super competitive.
Actually, teachers intentionally make the problem sets harder so that you have to work with other students. It's more like a collaborative school.
Like, what are some things that you can explore?
People. First of all, definitely people.
Congratulations again. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, bye.